One of the worst cars ever made, the PT Cruiser. Now PT stands for personal transport. It turns out that Chrysler was trying to pull a fast one and call it a truck to try to raise the average cafe gas mileage in the United States, but it didn't work out that way, so it's still classified as a car, as an SUV, not as a truck. Now these PT Cruisers were produced from 2001 to 2009. This particular one is a 2003. And right from the gate, big mistake, every single one of those was produced in Mexico. Now here's why you should listen to Scotty and not to these nuts in magazines and award winners. It was acclaimed that one of the best 10 cars of the year when it first came out, and they called it the North American Car of the Year. Now come on now, you come out with a new model, it's made in Mexico. How can you call it the Car of the Year? One of the top 10 cars. Come on. Now, yes, we do have the advantage of hindsight. It's now 2019. Well, at least it was when I made this video. In the future, it'll be later, but at least you'll understand. Back when they were making these things, they had no idea how they were going to last. How can you call it Car of the Year, top 10 car? They just started making them. You got no idea what kind of quality's in them. Now, not being a Chrysler fan, even back in 2001, I didn't expect much from these things, but I really didn't expect them to be as bad as they came out. Let's start under the hood. Look at all the plastic crap. Yes? Plastic everywhere. It cracks. It breaks. Look at the cheap faded bumper. It's supposed to be black. Now it's white. Now it's more than just superficial stuff with these. These engines are notorious for blowing head gaskets all the time. They overheat. I'd say at least 8 out of 10 ones that come here with overheating problems. First thing I do is use my block leak test. Find out, yep, the head gasket's blowing. I say, just get rid of the car. Don't go any further. Yeah, they look cute. That's how they sold 1.3 million of these clunkers. But man, looks can be deceiving in this case. Aside from the engines blowing head gaskets, the automatic transmissions were basically garbage. One, they could barely get out of their own way. Even though they kept trying to make the engines a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, they never were all that fast. But Americans mainly drive automatic transmission. And this car, man, it had one clunker transmission. This particular one, the 2003 PT Cruiser, has a measly little 4-speed automatic. It's 3 speeds with an overdrive on it. Even though they don't have much acceleration, they don't get very good gas mileage for a car this size either. This particular one gets in the teens in stop and go traffic. Gets about 18 miles a gallon. Now Chrysler's quality control, especially the ones made in Mexico, hey, it's notorious for being horrible. Those Dodge Neons were made in them. They were horrid. This is no exception. And if you ever made the mistake of buying the faster one, the one that's turbocharged, whew, that just turbocharges the head gasket blowing faster. That head gasket will blow so fast with the turbocharger around them, I've seen them go as little as 40,000 miles, and there goes the engine. Basically, it comes back to pretty much a Chrysler paradigm. They often make good-looking cars that just fall apart. You want a lawn ornament? Hey, park it on your front lawn. It looks cool, you know. But driving it every day for hundreds of thousands of miles, you can forget that, unless you got deep pockets to keep fixing it. Heck, even the heaters on these things break down. They use the cheaper heater core, and the stupid things either clog up or leak, and you gotta tear the whole dash apart to replace them. And here's the part I really don't understand. When this thing was brand new, a base model was $3,000 more than a 4-door Toyota Corolla. Yeah, back then the Corolla didn't have the cool gangster styling of this PT Cruiser, but it would run circles around one of these things. There you go, 400,000 miles or more, and this thing, sure, you're lucky if you get 80 or 90 before the engine blows. If you ever owned a Chrysler Neon, you were probably smart enough to realize, I'm not going to buy its replacement because the original one was bad enough. They were handy. Seats go down in the back. You got all kinds of space to throw crap in, like my customer has all their junk in there. It makes a big locker, good storage area, but has a vehicle for dependable transportation. This is one of the last things you'd ever want to buy. Now, this one's got 118,000 miles, and believe me, it's on its last legs. We'll start it up. You can hear squeaking there, and in the back you can hear the muffler vibrating. They just had poor, cheap build quality. Anybody in their right mind would say this is North American Car of the Year, one of the top 10 vehicles Well, that year, they got rocks in their head. At least if they were honest. No, I mean, if they're on the old payola, well, what the heck. A lot of people do that these days. Old Scotty knows. They'll tell you the truth about these things. I have no ulterior motives other than showing people what's out there, what's good, what's bad. Over the years, I've had a lot of women buy these because they thought they looked cute, just like the minis. They buy them because they think they look cute, only to find out that cuteness is hiding an endless money pit under the hood. 6 months ago, I had a customer buy a used one, and it was a convertible. They actually turned some of these into convertibles. He had just bought the vehicle for like $900. Brought it to me a couple months after he bought it, said, what's wrong? And there it was, a typical PT Cruiser. The head gasket was blowing, the engine was overheating. He put some of the sealer in it. He bought an AutoZone. Worked pretty good, the bar sealer for head gasket leaks, and just got rid of the thing. He said, sure, I'm not going any further on that. And you can even see, look in here, it's a small engine, but there isn't much working room. And these plastic intake manifolds, they crack and warp all the time. Sides from the engine head gaskets blowing, and their air conditioning compressors, they're notorious clunkers that break down after a short period of time. And these things were made in Mexico. You think at least they'd have good air conditioners. It gets hot down there, you know? It's like ages ago. The Germans, their cars had horrible air conditioning systems. A hot day in Dusseldorf is probably like 75 degrees. Now the Germans make better air conditioning systems, no arguing that. But this, hey, supposedly an American car. You'd think they could have put good AC in it, but no, it was just the usual Chrysler crap that would blow up. And the compressors would blow up long before their time. The condensers they used on them were a little bit too small, so they didn't cool it down right, so the compressors would always run hotter than other cars and then go out. I've seen that so many times, not just in the PT Cruiser, but in many Chrysler products. They try to make them too cheap to save money, then they don't hold up over time. In this case, it's a truism. Marketing trumped engineering and manufacturing in these PT Cruisers. So don't be suckered by, oh look, it's a cute little car. Maybe I'll get one for my kid to go to high school in. Don't. The engine problems, the transmission problems, the air conditioning problems, the heating problems, the electrical problems that these things had. It's truly amazing that Chrysler suckered 1.3 million people to buy these things. Now, eventually, they stopped making them in 2009. People wised up. And I guess Chrysler figured, hey, the jig's up. We can't fool people anymore. They have such a bad reputation. Nobody's going to be buying these things anymore. These SUV-type vehicles, crossovers, they're so popular these days. To fail at selling a model, that tells you there were problems and problems on top of problems with these PT Cruisers. Which leads me to the old joke. Why did they make a PT Cruiser so it could comfortably hold 5 people? Well, that's so 4 of them can get out and push it while the 5th person steers the car to the nearest garage. This happens to be a Suzuki, so I'll probably figure out what's wrong. I may or may not be able to fix it because they pulled out of the United States 12 years ago, and getting parts for these things is a pain in the hiney. It was even bad when they were here. Now they're gone, so not exactly a smart idea to buy one, but I got it cheap. We're going to try to figure out what's draining the battery. Now you never know. Could be a bad battery, could be lots of things. So we're going to start here. Gonna open the hood. We're gonna check the battery. Well, first we gotta take all this crap off because it's on top of the battery. Brilliant design. And here's the battery. We'll hook up our battery tester. Positive to positive. Negative to negative. See what's happening. 12 volts. It's a standard battery made in Korea. Cold cranking amps are 650. So we'll lower that to 650. And here we go. It says, suggest to replace the battery. Now this is a pretty new battery. The problem with many testing machines is they give you a false negative. This battery's only been here a short period of time. It's so low because it's getting drained that it's giving us a false reading. So first thing we're gonna do, test the charging system. We'll move it over here where we can reach it. Charging is perfectly fine. So now we know for a fact charging system's working, but the battery, it says replaced because it's so low, which is often a false reading. There's got to be something draining this battery. So we're going to get my handy amp checker. This does amperage, AC and DC. Then we will clamp it all the way around the negative battery terminals coming off. 0.368, 0.37 amp draw. Now the normal accepted draw is 0.05, and this is a lot more than that. So there is a giant draw somewhere. It can be anywhere. So start looking for odd things. Things that don't work, that used to, things that stay on when they're not supposed to. And I noticed one thing in this car. When I shut it off, it kept dinging. And look, the car's turned off, the door's open, it's dinging. It should not ding until you put the key in the ignition switch. We shouldn't be sitting there dinging. We'll put the seat belt on so it won't ding much, right? Now, if we open the door now, it's supposed to ding, which it does. But when we take the seat belt off and turn the car off, right? Now, everything should be turned off, but we can notice the radio is still on. It should not be on, and when we open the door, this baby's dinging. Since it is dinging, as soon as we open the car door, even without the key in, hey, it could easily be a broken ignition switch that even though you turned it off, the electric part isn't shutting power off. So let's check that possibility. This panel off to access things better. Millimeters. And this pops out. Doesn't want to pop out, but it will. Cheaply made these, they didn't snap out right. Take this cover off to access the switch. And off comes the top and the bottom. Unplug the ignition switch inside and look. Now the drain has dropped down to 003, which is well within parameters. 0.05 is the most, so that's it. In this case, the ignition switch is bad because it's acting like when you take the key out, that it's still in the on position. So it's allowing electrical stuff to run, and that's what's draining the battery. Once I unplug that switch, it's no longer connected to the electrical system because I unplugged the electric part. And as you can see, the drain is now totally acceptable, hardly anything at all. But like I said, this is a Suzuki. They haven't sold these things in the United States for ages, so good luck trying to find an ignition switch. Now, as you can see as we go inside here, changing out the ignition switch isn't that big of a deal. It is right here. You just take a couple screws out, it pops off, and you put a new one in. So in this case, if you're going to park it any length of time, you can just take off the battery terminal. Take it off. And of course, now as you can see, the drain is 000. There's no drain at all because the battery's not connected and it won't drain. Now these clamp amp meters aren't that expensive. I think I spent 80 bucks on this one. It's an Intertech. You can use it on your house too because it does AC and DC. You find if you really have a short, and the reason this is really good is because it's non-intrusive. You don't have to take anything apart. You just clamp it on. On modern cars, when you disconnect the battery, all kinds of wacky stuff can go on. It might idle poorly, it might not shift right, you might have to do a computer relearn. This does it without taking anything apart. Just clamps on the wires and it can measure all kinds of things. In this case, we were measuring the amp flow. Now the ignition switch should not have any power going through it when you take the key out. That's why I was able to figure this out so fast. Because it's just sitting there and I open the door, it shouldn't be dinging, right? Here's my matrix. Look, when they're just sitting there, they don't make any noise until you put the key in. That was making noise without the key in, meaning that somehow it was being powered up. Now, a lot of things could theoretically do it, but the most common is a broken ignition switch. When you turn it in the off position, the electrical part breaks and it doesn't go off. It keeps sending power by the contact being worn and still sends electricity through. With some relatively inexpensive equipment, you can see if you got a battery drain. And two, probably not a good idea to buy a Suzuki in the United States. I can't get parts for this thing, right? So he's just gonna have to disconnect the battery when he lets it sit. Now this is a knockaround vehicle for him, so if they're gonna let it sit for 2 or 3 days, they can just take the battery terminal. Believe it or not, if you watch my other video on this vehicle has 105 trouble codes, so it's not something you want to invest too much money into. A 2010 Chevy Cobalt, and I'm going to tell you the truth about them. This particular one is a 2-door. Gets pretty good gas mileage. So it gets about 25 miles a gallon in the city and 36 on the highway, so it's good on gas. And when it was brand new, it was about $15,000. But back in the year 2010, when this was new, for $1,000 more, you could have gotten a Toyota Corolla, a much better made car. Now, as we look inside this one, we can see 103,000 miles and it's still running. When we start it up, shaking a little and the tire pressure monitoring light's coming on. That's not a big deal itself, but let's take it for a spin. You can hear the suspension clonking a little. Let's see how it takes off. Get some room here. It doesn't take off all that bad. The corner's okay. It's a pretty bumpy ride. It's a small wheelbase, and let's face it, it's a 10-year-old GM product. You go down the road, you're gonna feel the bumps in it. And as in the Econobox car, got the plain old seats, pretty basic trim, you know, basic little radio. It does have AC and it still works. And it's a typical small two-door. Not that much room in the back seat. And when we open the trunk up, small car, but it's got a deep enough trunk. There's still some room in it. So let's check under the hood. Strangely enough, for an Econobox car, it's got a hydraulic strut. Now, the engine itself is a 2.2 liter engine that puts out a reasonable amount of horsepower. It's got 155 horsepower, so for its size, it's relatively quick. 2010 Corolla, you get 158 horsepower on one of those, so it's not running away from the Corolla speed-wise either. It's got a 4-speed automatic transmission. That's a decent transmission. They don't have any particular problems. And when we check the engine, it's got a timing chain. It isn't one of those rubber timing belts, so it is better made. So for all intents and purposes, it's not a terrible car, but it's not a great car either. Disc brakes up front, but when you go to the back, it just says cheap drum brakes on it. And you can see parts of the paint are fading away. And the front headlamps are all fogging up because it's cheap plastic stuff. You can see they're all fading away. So my opinion, hey, you would have been nuts to buy one of these things brand new when you could have gotten a Toyota Corolla for $1,000 more and have 4 doors instead of 2 and a much better built car. And that's something I always warn somebody about if they're buying a used car. You got a real old inspection sticker on it, be very leery. Personally, I probably would never buy a car that had a sticker that old. You never know what the underlying problem is or why it never got inspected. Could be a really expensive problem. So you see something like that on a used car, run away. Don't even think about buying it. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.